Federalist 24, Part 3. This is paragraph 8. If he should not apply himself to a careful and critical survey of the Articles of Confederation, his astonishment would not only be increased, but would acquire a mixture of indignation at the unexpected discovery that these articles, instead of containing the prohibition he looked for, and though they had with a jealous circumspection restricted the authority of the state legislature in this particular, had not imposed a single restraint on that of the United States. If he happened to be a man of quick sensibility or ardent temper, he could now no longer refrain from pronouncing these clamors to be the dishonest artifices of a sinister and unprincipled opposition to a plan which ought at least to receive a fair and candid examination from all sincere lovers of their country. How else, he would say, could the authors of them have been tempted to vent such loud censures upon the plan about a point in which it seems to have conformed itself to the general sense of America as declared in its different forms of government, and in which it has even superadded a new and powerful guard unknown to any of them? If, on the contrary, he happened to be a man of calm and dispassionate feelings, he would indulge a sigh for the frailty of human nature, and would lament that in a matter so interesting to the happiness of millions, the true merits of the question should be perplexed and obscured by expedients so unfriendly to an impartial and right determination. Even such a man could hardly forbear remarking that a conduct of this kind has too much the appearance of an intention to mislead the people by alarming their passions, rather than to convince them by arguments addressed to their understandings. So again, he says, look, if a stranger were visiting our state and was looking at the papers and was reading all these criticism that the opposition is printing against this Constitution, against the accusation that we are going to have professional standing armies, he says, if this person actually reads the Articles of Confederation, our first Constitution, he will find out that in the Articles of Confederation, there's no such a thing as standing army, no mention of it, or at least in the sense that these people are accusing of. So this visitor will find that all these people who are writing these articles against us, against this new Constitution, are not honest people. They're trying to mislead the American people. They're trying to play with their passions rather than actually telling them the exact facts, or criticizing, but factually criticizing, not make up things. But however little this objection may be countenanced, even by precedents among ourselves, it may be satisfactory to take a nearer view of its intrinsic merits. From a close examination, it will appear that restraints upon the discretion of the legislature in respect to military establishments would be improper to be imposed, and if imposed, from the necessities of society, would be unlikely to be observed. Though a wide ocean separates the United States from Europe, Yet there are various considerations that warn us against an excessive confidence or security. On one side of us, and stretching far into our rear, are growing settlements subject to the dominion of Britain. On the other side, and extending to meet the British settlements, are colonies and establishments subject to the dominion of Spain. The situation and the vicinity of West India Islands belonging to these two powers create between them, in respect to their American possessions and in relation to us, a common interest. The savage tribes on our western frontier ought to be regarded as our natural enemies, their natural allies. Our natural enemies, their natural allies, because they have most to fear from us and most to hope from them. The improvements in the art of navigation have, as to the facility of communication, rendered distant nations in a great measure neighbors. Britain and Spain are among the principal maritime powers of Europe. A future concert of views between these nations ought not to be regarded as improbable. A future concert of views means them coming to a point that they actually have the same interest about something. So don't think that just because they're competing empires, they are not going to at one time have the same interest and might actually work together. The increasing remoteness of consanguinity is every day diminishing the force of the family compact between France and Spain. And politicians have ever with great reason considered the ties of blood as feeble and precarious links of political connection. These circumstances combined admonish us not to be too sanguine in considering ourselves as entirely out of reach of danger. Okay, let me explain this paragraph on the map. We've talked about this before. Remember, this part is occupied by Spain. Okay, this part. And then there are Spanish settlements all around here. And when he uses the word rear here by the British, remember, British and French fought a war. British took control of what is now Canada. And as we have talked, they would not vacate, they would not leave some of the forts over here, because they were saying, well, you haven't given us all the money you owe us to the Americans. You haven't given us all the money you owe us, your people owe us. Why should we leave these forts like we said in the Peace Treaty of 1783? Because in that same treaty you said you will honor your debts, your payback. So you've got British here, and then British are going to, when he says rear, he's talking about this area. Okay, we might say in front of us, but it says rear. So he says the British are going to be over here, the Spanish over here, and then unfortunately he uses the word savage, but that's what he uses for the Native American tribes that are here. So he says we're in a way surrounded, okay, and all the West India islands that he's talking about Caribbean islands, which are over here down below, which you can look on the map. And he also says that the improvement of navigation has made it much easier for their ships to get to America than maybe 50 years ago, 100 years ago. So he says we have to be united. We have to have an army, not a huge army, but a good-sized army, a professional army, standing army, to defend ourselves in case England and Spain find that it's better for them to be friends and attack us and divide us. He says, even though France and Spain are now close to each other because they had a family connection between the French and the Spain, he says it probably will not stay this way. And one day you might see Spain and Britain decide that their interest overwhelms our interest and they'll just buddy up, become friends, and then decide to split us. And as has happened all around the world, especially in that century and in the 19th century, they would have what we call today spheres of influence. So he says, do not be fools to think that England and Spain are going to, British and Spanish are going to be enemies all the time. They might become enemies in the long run, but sometimes they'll decide it's to their interest to be friends and divide us and take our resources and keep us weak. So that's what he's talking about. Because as you will go further and read, by the time Thomas Jefferson became president in the year 1801, it was the French Bonaparte, Napoleon, that he ended up buying the Louisiana Purchase, which doubled the size of America. Louisiana Purchase covers this whole area right here, right from here and then all the way up there. And it wasn't the Spanish he bought it from. He bought it from Napoleon. That's why I said that they were connected, at least the dynasties were. So keep that in mind, and we will read a few more paragraphs in the next video.